They say graduations are for new beginnings, but that day marked the brutal end of something I hadn't even realized was dying. My name's Noah, and at my sister's Stanford graduation, my parents stood in front of everyone and announced I was no longer part of the family, publicly, casually. Like I was a bad investment, they were finally writing off. No heads up, no confrontation, just a mic drop moment served under a sky full of celebration and champagne. I got there early. Not because I was eager to celebrate her. I love my sister, don't get me wrong, but because I needed to see for myself if they'd actually followed through. If I'd really become invisible. Stanford's campus glowed like a damn postcard that morning. All crisp blue sky and overachievers in tailored gowns. Families fluttered around with their phones out, filming every step like it was a royal coronation. I clutched nothing but a second-hand leather bag and a thin folder in case I needed to prove I was even invited. There they were, my mom, Ophelia, perfectly composed in a peach suit, hair shellacked into place, and my dad Roland checking his Rolex like he was waiting for a board meeting to start. Between them stood Ivy, my younger sister by 2 years, and their pride and joy. Her honor cords looked like medals. Her hair was curled like a bridal ad, and her smile was the kind that earned magazine covers. They didn't notice me. At first, I stood about 10 feet away, watching, hoping stupidly that maybe they'd wave, maybe Mom would mouth, "Hi, sweetie." She didn't. Instead, she turned slowly like she'd heard a strange sound and saw me standing there. Her expression didn't change. "Oh, Noah, you came," she said like she was commenting on the weather. I gave a little shrug. "Well, I got the forwarded invite. Figured I'd see if the RSVP list reached my inbox this time." She offered that tight-lipped smile people wear when they're pretending not to smell something sour. "Ah, right." My father didn't look up, just adjusted his tie. Ivy pulled me into a brief hug. She smelled like designer florals and nervous energy. "You look good," I said. "You too," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. "I'm glad you came." But she didn't sound glad. She sounded like she was bracing for fallout, like always. I wandered toward the welcome sign near the seating tent. "Rowan family and guests," it read in calligraphy. My parents' names were printed underneath, followed by Ivy's, and 2 generic placeholders. I looked for my name. Nothing. When a volunteer handed me a name tag, it said, "Guest in generic font. No family crest, no last name." I helped design that crest when I was a kid. It used to be on our stationery, our Christmas cards, the cufflinks Dad wore to business galas. I should have walked away right then. That would have been the self-respecting move, but I didn't. I clipped the badge to my blazer and walked into that tent like a ghost, invited to her own haunting. The ceremony began at exactly 10:00 a.m. I sat in the outermost row, flanked by a woman snoring into her scarf and a toddler gnawing on a program. It was the kind of distance that made sense visibly there, but completely irrelevant. After the usual university speeches, something shifted. My dad stood up. He walked to the podium, cleared his throat, and gave the kind of polished smile that made you think he could sell umbrellas in a desert. "Today," he said, "we celebrate the brightest light in our lives. Ivy, Rowan, her brilliance, her tenacity, her vision. It humbles us." Polite applause. Cameras clicked. Ivy lowered her eyes like she was shy. She wasn't. But today, he went on, is also a moment of realignment. A family must reflect its core values. And as such, we've made a decision to part ways with those who no longer represent those values. Pause. Then, as of today, we are no longer extending our family name or resources to our eldest daughter, Noah. Silence. Not stunned silence, just awkward shifting. Like people weren't sure if they heard right or if it was maybe a metaphor. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stared at a scuff mark on the edge of the podium and tried not to feel my heartbeat hammering behind my eyes. Somewhere behind me, a voice whispered, "Did he just disown her?" Another replied, "At a graduation." I stood up, not out of drama, just because sitting felt impossible. I walked out of the tent as calmly as I could, every step feeling like it might give out. At the reception, I searched for my name again. The long banquet table had name cards. Ivy, Rowan, Aunt Camille, Dr. Jensen, mentor, no Noah. Not even a placeholder. A girl I hadn't seen since freshman year blinked when she saw me. "Oh? I thought you weren't coming. Your mom said it was a family-only celebration, something about keeping the energy clear." Clear? Right. On the table was a folded ivory card. I opened it out of habit. "To our only daughter, Ivy. You make us proud every single day. Love, Mom and Dad." That was it. That was the moment something unhooked in my chest. Not snapped, not broke, just shifted. I turned, a woman with a clipboard looked at my chest and said, "Oh, you must be with catering. You're not wearing a family pin." I looked down at my name badge. Guest. No name, no title, no legacy. A ghost with laminated proof. I didn't answer her. Just grabbed a glass of sparkling wine from a tray and slipped out the side of the tent. My heels clicked quietly against the concrete. I didn't stop walking until I was blocks away watching families clink glasses in sidewalk cafes and toddlers swing graduation balloons bigger than they were. At a crosswalk, I passed a souvenir shop selling Stanford-themed teddy bears. I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because I realized something. You can spend years trying to be part of a picture only to learn they already photoshopped you out. Back in my apartment, I dropped my bag on the floor and collapsed onto the couch. The graduation program fluttered out and landed open. A photo caught my eye. My parents and Ivy smiling under a tree. The caption read, "A proud day for the Rowan family." No trace of me. Later that night, I pulled out an old photo album from the bookshelf, Ivy's high school graduation. There was a family tribute page, a printed quote to the daughter who gives us hope and joy. "We're so lucky to call you ours." I stared at the photo beneath it. I remembered it well. I was in that photo originally. We were on the porch steps, Ivy in her red dress, me in the blue one Mom picked for me. Only now I wasn't there. I'd been cropped out. Cleanly, not a shoulder, not a shadow, just gone. That was when I stopped hoping. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally believed them. They hadn't forgotten me. They had removed me. I didn't sleep much that night. At some point around midnight, I found myself at my desk opening a folder on my laptop I hadn't touched in years, back when I used to help Mom with the books for the Rowan Foundation. They never revoked my login. Typical, they erased names on paper, not passwords. I clicked through documents, mostly noise, until I found a folder labeled Holdings Update. Inside was a PDF. Transfer Authorization Cape House. I clicked froze. There was my name, typed above a signature that wasn't mine. The signature looked close, but the loop in the A was wrong, the tilt too upright. It was forged sloppy, but legal enough to fool someone. The notary, Savannah Rowan. My cousin. Of course. I compared it to a lease I'd signed a year earlier. Side by side, it was obvious. They didn't just disown me, they stole from me. The beach house had been the only thing I still had from Granddad. He left it to all three of us. Me, Ivy, and Mom split evenly in his will. Now it was gone. Signed away. To a holding company owned by, I paused, Harlow Ventures. Ivy's startup. I stared at the screen until the blue light made my eyes sting. This wasn't a severance. This was a robbery with pearls on. And I was done. Not just with hoping, not just with showing up. Done letting them erase me without a fight. By the time the sun started to rise, my laptop had been open for nearly 6 hours. Coffee, cold legs, numb, heart sharp. I didn't rage, didn't spiral, I just got methodical. Because ghosts don't knock when they want justice. We slip through systems unnoticed. The document transfer authorization Cape House was just the first brick, and I was ready to build a whole damn wall with it. There was something about the calm after betrayal. It clears your head in a strange way, like stepping outside after a fire and realizing your house didn't just burn, it was doused and lit with purpose. I knew what I had to do, but first I needed proof. Real, legal, cold-blooded proof. And I knew exactly who to call. The only person in our family who ever told me the truth was Aunt Jules. Mom's older sister, retired art teacher, part-time herbalist, full-time realist. She once gave me an envelope with $200 and a note that said, "Don't tell your mother. Buy what makes you feel like yourself. She answered on the second ring, Noah baby, it's early. You okay? I didn't even try to hide the crack in my voice. Did you know about the house transfer? Silence. Then a sigh. Not surprised, resigned. I heard whispers. Sweetheart, your mom said it was a restructure, something about simplifying the trust. It wasn't a restructure, Jules. They forged my name, sold it to a company Ivy owns. They erased me legally. She cursed under her breath. Rare for her. I told her it didn't feel right. She just said Noah's moved on. She doesn't care about that stuff. I didn't think it was theft. It was another pause. I'm so sorry, Noah. I should have asked more questions. No, I said quietly. They were counting on no one asking anything. The next week was a blur of research, screenshotting, cross-checking dates, and gathering receipts, literal and emotional. I requested a full property history from the Cape County Registrar. The final sale listed the buyer as Harlow Ventures LLC transaction authorized by 3 signatures. My parents' Ivy and mine, except mine was fake. I printed the documents' highlighted discrepancies and clipped them into a folder like I was preparing a class presentation, except the grade would be their reputation, and I intended to fail them. Then came the good part, the metadata. People forget. PDFs, hold secrets, timestamps, editing trails, revision histories. And guess what? The original signature field was blank. It had been digitally inserted 2 weeks later after the notary date. It was amateur hour forgery, and I had every breadcrumb. But even then I hesitated, because part of me, the Noah. They raised, still whispered. Maybe just ask them. Maybe they'll explain. I almost laughed at myself. Explain. Like they explained why my name was never on holiday cards, or why Ivy's college tuition came from my inheritance fund. No? This time I wasn't asking for a seat. I was building my own table with locks. My official next move was a visit to the family lawyer, a man named Carson Bell, who'd handled Rowan family assets for 2 decades. I wore a navy jumpsuit and red lipstick, my armor. The receptionist blinked when I walked in. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, but I have a forged document in 20 minutes. That got me a meeting. Carson was in his 60s with polished glasses and a practiced smile. He looked like he ironed his socks. When I handed him the folder, he barely blinked. This signature doesn't match your legal records, he said quietly. I know, that's why I'm here. He flipped pages slowly. You understand the weight of what you're alleging. I leaned back. Do you understand the weight of stealing a home from your own daughter? Silence. He closed the folder. This should have never happened. I'll need to consult an independent auditor. No need, I said, placing a USB drive on his desk. The metadata's all here. Timeline, editing trail, original, unaltered version. Carson looked at it like it was radioactive. You kept receipts. They raised me to... That night, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I just sat by the window listening to the city hum like nothing monumental had just cracked open. It felt strange holding the truth like a knife I didn't want to use, but knowing I had every right to. Part of me hoped they'd call Say Something Anything, but all I got was silence. Until Thursday. When a package arrived, no return address. No note. Inside was a book, The Ethics of Wealth by Roland Rowan. My father's self-published philosophy collection he handed out like candy to interns and donors. The inscription read, to Ivy, you represent everything this family stands for. Wrong address. No message received. By Friday, I filed a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Board. I attached the documents listed Carson Bell as a witness and included a notarized affidavit of signature fraud. I copied the Rowan Foundation's general inbox, and I waited. Not long. 3 days later, my inbox exploded. The foundation issued a clarification email to their mailing list. It was vague, something about internal restructuring and transitional holdings. But they forgot one thing. The internet loves a mystery. Within hours, someone posted screenshots. A thread started on Twitter. Stanford grad's sister disowned at graduation. Now suing over stolen property, WTF. It wasn't even my post. But the story grew. Comments rolled in like waves. Wait, this is real. Imagine disowning your daughter while wearing matching family values pins. The audacity is generational. My DMs flooded reporters, legal influencers, even a podcast request. I didn't answer. Not yet. because I hadn't dropped the real bomb. See, I wasn't just digging into the beach house. I was digging into everything. Bank transfers from my inheritance fund. Charity gala proceeds routed through Ivy's company. A legacy trust my grandmother created, conveniently edited after her death. They weren't sloppy. They were arrogant, and they never thought I'd notice. But I did, and I was about to make sure the world did too. Because you can only crop someone out of your life for so long before they become the headline you can't erase. By Monday, I was trending on a subreddit I hadn't posted in something like RR Estranged Stories. A thread titled, "She got disowned at her sister's graduation and exposed her family's fraud with receipts. Watch out, golden children." They didn't use my name, but anyone who knew me, they knew. I didn't post anything. Still haven't. That's the part people forget sometimes. Revenge doesn't need a loud voice, just facts, quiet ones. And mine were stacked like dominoes. By the time the Foundation's PR team tried to get ahead of the story, it was too late. You can't clean up a mess you're still pretending doesn't exist. They released a 2-paragraph statement. The Rowan Foundation is reviewing internal processes and remains committed to transparency and family-centered philanthropy. I laughed when I read that, not bitterly, almost gently, like, wow, this is the best lie you could manage. Ivy's startup website went under maintenance a few hours later. Their slogan had been, "Legacy-driven investments inspired by home." I guess the irony finally hit. On Wednesday, I went back to the Cape House. I hadn't been there since I was 19. I didn't drive, I took the train. Brought no luggage, just a flash drive, a notepad, and the keys. Granddad left me in a tiny box with a card that said, "For when you need to remember who you are." I used to think he meant emotionally. Now I think he meant legally. The house still smelled like cedar and salt. The porch creaked the same way. Someone had repainted the front door seafoam green. There was a new keypad lock. Ivy's lock. It didn't matter. I walked around the back, popped open the shed, and used the old brass skeleton key from under the workbench. They forgot I knew all the hidden spots. Inside it looked like a Pinterest board had thrown up minimalist furniture, a coffee table made of driftwood and regret framed quotes in cursive. Live, laugh, inherit. A manila folder sat on the counter. Inside it was a timeline, renovation, invoices, guest rentals, investor pitches. They'd been using the house as collateral. They'd taken something meant to be shared sacred and turned it into collateral for ambition. There was also a note in Ivy's handwriting. "Don't worry, Noah won't care. She never really liked this place anyway." The lie was small, casual, cruel. Because I loved that house. I painted the shutters one summer while listening to podcasts and crying about my breakup. I carved my initials into the baseboard in the pantry. I once fell asleep on the back porch, listening to waves and thinking, this is the only place where no one asks me to be smaller. And now it was a prop. That was the moment I stopped playing nice. The legal motion I filed was quiet, strategic. A trust contest with supporting affidavits, metadata logs, forged documents, and a request for temporary asset freeze. I didn't warn them. I didn't owe them that. And when the court accepted the motion, things moved fast. Carson Bell called me personally. "Noah, your parents have requested a mediation meeting. Tell them I don't negotiate with thieves." There was a pause. "You should know. They're planning to countersue. Then I hope they enjoy discovery." The thing about being erased is eventually you learn how to walk through rooms unnoticed. That's how I'd collected the recordings. Every off-the-record donor meeting, every car ride home after fundraisers, every comment whispered just out of earshot. I kept them. Not out of malice, but because something told me one day they'd pretend they never said it. One recording in particular. A panel prep call. My mom laughing softly, saying Noah's never been part of the image. She's not marketable, not in the way Ivy is. Followed by my father's voice. We gave her the tools. If she didn't build anything with them, that's on her. I clipped the file, named it Toolbox MP3. The day the court date was finalized, my mom texted me. Just 3 words. "Let's talk soon." I didn't answer. 2 hours later, Ivy DM'd me on LinkedIn. "If you needed money, you could have just asked." As if my integrity had a price tag, and they were confused about the number. It didn't make me angry, it made me tired. They never saw me as a threat. Just a footnote with a good memory and bad timing. But now they couldn't ignore me because the system they used to climb, it was the same one I used to pull them down. The night before the court hearing, I stood in front of my closet staring at rows of black. I didn't want to wear grief, so I picked red. Not flashy, just bold enough to remind them I wasn't fading anymore. I tied my hair back, wore flat shoes, brought a flash drive and a single photo. One of me and Granddad on the back porch, paint stains on our clothes, smiles wide and unscripted. That's the legacy they tried to scrub. I put the photo in my folder, not for the judge. For me, when I entered the courthouse the next morning, the air smelled like paper and old carpet. My parents sat at the far end of the room, whispering to their attorney. Ivy sat next to them, chewing on her nail. I didn't make eye contact. They didn't try. But I noticed my mom's lapel pin, our old family crest, was missing. For the first time, she looked like just a woman in nice clothes with a lot to lose. Our case was third on the docket. The judge was stern, mid-50s, and unimpressed by performative smiles. When our names were called, I stood. So did they. Case 2023, CV 11843. The clerk said Rowan versus Rowan. And just like that, I wasn't the family ghost anymore. I was their reckoning. Courtrooms aren't built for emotion. They're made for records, not feelings. No music, no color, just beige walls and the hum of a barely functioning AC unit. But when the clerk read out Rowan versus Rowan, it felt like thunder inside my chest. The judge, Honorable Miriam S. Keller, peered at us over wire-rimmed glasses like a disappointed schoolteacher. "Let's begin," she said. "Petitioner, you may proceed." My lawyer, Ash Patel, stood calm, deliberate. No theatrics, the kind of person who could make even a grocery receipt sound damning. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not a case of a family misunderstanding. It is a pattern of calculated omission, financial misrepresentation, and inheritance, fraud executed quietly and cloaked in reputation." He handed the judge the first folder. Exhibit A, the forged transfer of the Cape House. She examined it, her brows lifting as she flipped to the signature page. "This is your client's signature?" she asked. "No, Your Honor," Ash said. "This is a falsified digital signature. We've included comparison samples from verified documents. Exhibit BA, signed lease agreement from 2 years prior. Mine. The loops, the strokes, it wasn't even close." The judge nodded slowly. "Continue." On the other side of the room, Roland shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ophelia kept her hands clasped like she was posing for a magazine cover. Ivy, for once, looked like she wanted to disappear. Ash continued. Exhibit C, the metadata logs. Time-stamped edits, inserted signatures, deleted versions. Then came Exhibit D, voice recordings. "Your Honor, this next exhibit contains verbal evidence of exclusionary practices regarding the petitioner's legal rights as a beneficiary." The courtroom assistant played the audio. My mother's voice, clear, clipped, confident. "We only use Ivy's image. Noah doesn't align with what we represent." Then my father, "She reads too much, always trying to prove something." The judge blinked slowly, pausing the audio halfway through. "You're telling me these are the parents of the petitioner?" "Yes," Ash said. Ophelia's lawyer, a tightly wound woman named Tessa with a $500 haircut, and the confidence of someone used to winning, stood to object. "Your Honor, this was a private strategy session. It was never meant." "Was it recorded illegally?" Tessa faltered. "Well, technically no." "Then it stands," the judge said. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the judge, because that's the only person I needed to see me that day. Then Ash presented the final document. Exhibit E, Granddad's original will. The unedited one. The one naming me, Ivy, and my mother as equal inheritors of the Cape House. It had been witnessed, notarized, and submitted to a safe deposit box, one they didn't think I had access to. But Jules had helped quietly without telling anyone because she knew. This version, Ash explained, was replaced 6 months later without notification or legal amendment by a version that removed my client's name entirely. The judge stared at it. Ophelia finally spoke. That version was never finalized. It was a draft. The judge cut her off. Was it signed and witnessed? Yes. Then it's binding, unless proven otherwise. The courtroom fell into silence. Ivy sat frozen, her foot tapping wildly beneath the table. Roland looked like he'd aged 10 years in 20 minutes. Ophelia stayed composed, but her grip on her handbag strap was tight enough to split leather. Then the judge spoke again. Mrs. Rowan, did you knowingly submit a will to probate that excluded your daughter despite being aware of a notarized version that included her? A pause, just long enough to feel the weight of it. Yes, she said finally, but it wasn't personal. That's when I stood up. Not to make a speech, not to scream, just to say one thing. You didn't erase me out of necessity. You erased me out of convenience. The judge held up a hand. Miss Rowan, please sit. Your statement will be accepted later. But it didn't matter. I'd already said what I needed. By the end of the session, the ruling was clear. The Cape House would be reinstated under the original will. The Rowan Foundation's finances would be subject to an independent audit. Trust distributions would be frozen, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. It wasn't just a win, it was a correction. A legal eraser swiping back over years of silence. Tessa requested an extension. The judge denied it. My mother stood slowly like the floor was betraying her. You wanted to humiliate us, she hissed. No, I said calmly. I wanted to stop pretending you didn't. After court, Ivy caught up with me in the parking garage. Her heels clicked on the concrete like gunshots in a cathedral. Noah, wait. I did. She looked like she'd been crying. Mascara smudged, lipstick half worn. You were right, she said softly. About all of it, I knew about the transfer. I didn't know they forged your name, I swear. I stared at her. Ivy had always been the sun in every family photo, but in that moment, she looked like someone who finally realized the warmth came at a cost. I don't hate you, I said, but I don't trust you either. I know. She looked down, then handed me an envelope. Just something I wrote. No pressure. I didn't open it. Just nodded once. Then walked away. Back in my apartment, I dropped everything on the kitchen counter. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just breathed. A long, deep inhale that felt like oxygen for the first time in years. Later, I opened Ivy's envelope. Inside was a single line. You were always the strong one. I'm sorry it took this to see it. No manipulation. No excuses. Just truth. Still, I didn't reply. Because growth doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means closure. A week later, I returned to the Cape House with Jules. We didn't talk much. We just walked the shoreline barefoot, letting the water bite our ankles. I'm proud of you, she said. For what? For being louder than they ever let you be. I looked out at the horizon, the sky stretching wide and endless. I didn't win, I said. No, she replied. But you made sure they didn't either. You'd think the victory would come with trumpets, headlines, a movie montage. But the truth? Victory felt like early mornings with the windows cracked, the sound of waves, and a silence that didn't ache. It had been 3 weeks since the ruling. The Cape House was officially mine, not shared, not borrowed, not hidden behind LLCs and fake signatures. Mine. I'd gone back the day the audit notice was sent to the Rowan Foundation. I needed to see the house as it really was without their fingerprints. Ivy's driftwood table, gone. The framed quotes, all boxed up. I kept the porch swing and the pantry baseboard with my carved initials. And then I started working. Not just on renovations, but on something bigger. It started with an idea scrawled on a napkin during a ferry ride back from Boston. A retreat for women like me. Those who'd been cropped out of their own stories, the silenced, the erased. A place to write, to rest, to remember themselves again. I called it the archive. Not because we were dusty relics of family drama, but because we deserved to be documented, preserved, seen. Jules loved it immediately. You're taking the house they tried to erase you from, she said, and turning it into something they can't touch. That became my mission. I used part of the inheritance funds, yes, the ones they tried to redirect to Ivy's real estate firm, and hired a small renovation crew. Nothing flashy, just new wiring, updated plumbing, and turning the second floor into 3 quiet writing rooms. Each one was named after women in my grandmother's journals, her sisters, her mother, and a friend. She never married, but always called my true north. I kept one room for myself tucked away under the eaves. It had no Wi-Fi, just a window and a desk. One afternoon, while clearing out a storage chest in the attic, I found a folder labeled Elise's Notes, my grandmother's handwriting sharp and neat. Inside was a letter addressed to no one in particular, to the ones they pretend not to see. If they won't make space for you, make your own. If they silence you, write louder. And if they forget your name, build something with it they can't ignore. I sat on the floor for a long time holding that letter. She knew. She'd always known. Meanwhile, the fallout was slow but relentless. The state auditor's investigation into the Rowan Foundation had begun. Donors were pulling out quietly at first, then publicly. An anonymous letter had leaked, though I didn't write it highlighting discrepancies in Ivy's company finances. Investors were asking questions. And Roland, the man who once gave keynotes on legacy and leadership, he'd stepped down from the board to focus on family. That was the headline. But the comments beneath told the real story. Funny how legacy crumbles when receipts show up. They should have invested in ethics. Disowned the wrong daughter. They never reached out. Not Roland, not Ophelia, not even a denial. Their silence wasn't defensive. It was defeat. I didn't dance on the ashes. I didn't tweet screenshots or start a podcast. I just kept building. Because some legacies aren't taken. They're rebuilt. 2 months into the archive's construction, I got a letter from a woman named Carmen. She'd heard about the retreat through a friend of Jules Said. She'd been erased by a father who thought daughters didn't deserve equity. She wanted to apply, not for pity, just for space. Her last line broke me. I don't want revenge. I just want a place to write like I exist. That was it. That was the mission. I hosted the first Writers' Week in early October. 3 women came, one from Ohio, one from Montreal, one from an hour away. We didn't do icebreakers or trust falls, just tea in the mornings, writing sessions in the afternoons, and shared dinners cooked in my grandmother's old Dutch oven. No one asked what happened. No one had to. We wrote about it not directly, but through essays, stories, poems with sharp corners. The kind of writing that leaves your ribs humming. On the last night, I read them the letter I found in the attic. No dramatics, no voice cracks, just words steady and clear. And when I finished, Carmen said, "You're not a ghost anymore." That's when I realized I hadn't just taken back my name. I'd rebuilt it into a shelter. A week later, I went into town to grab supplies. At the bookstore checkout, I noticed a magazine at the register. Ivy was on the cover. The headline read, "The Next Chapter Legacy Redefined." I flipped it open. She was launching something new, a fund for women-led businesses. No mention of the house, no mention of the lawsuit, not even a nod to the foundation. But in her interview, she said one thing. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is listen to the people you were taught to ignore. I stared at those words. I didn't feel angry or vindicated, just done. Whatever reckoning she was having, she'd have to walk through it herself. That wasn't my story to carry anymore. That night, back at the Cape House, I walked out to the edge of the dock. The stars were out clean and scattered, and I thought about how easy it is to believe you're alone when the people who should see you don't even look up. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had names etched into wood, letters folded in drawers, women around a dinner table trading poems for peace, and a house full of silence that finally felt like home. 6 months after the hearing, the Cape House didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like mine. Not in the petty, territorial way I used to imagine, where I'd reclaim every wall just to prove I existed. No. It was softer than that now. Quieter, stronger. I wasn't building something in spite of them anymore. I was building because of me. The archive had expanded. Word had spread faster than I expected. Not because of ads or buzz, just people telling other people. There's a place for us now. Women who had been called too sensitive, too loud, too quiet, too much. One night over peppermint tea, a poet from Oregon looked at me and said, "It feels like this house remembers what it means to hold people." That stayed with me. I didn't speak to my parents. Not because I was angry. Because I was finally full. That kind of silence isn't bitter. It's holy. One day in February, a package arrived. No return address, just my name, handwritten in narrow script. Inside was a gold lapel pin, the Rowan family crest. Below it, a sticky note. "Figured this belonged to you more than it ever did to us. Jay." It had to be Jules. Or Ivy, I'd never know. I placed it in the same box where I kept my old Stanford name tag guest, and the only letter Ivy ever wrote me. I didn't pin the crest to my jacket. I'd earned something better. In April, I was invited to speak at a storytelling conference, a small one. Community-focused, no stage lighting, just folding chairs and shared microphones. I debated saying no, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to turn the past into performance. But then I thought of Carmen. Of the writer from Montreal who stayed up 3 nights in a row journaling about the sister who ghosted her. Of the high school girl who emailed me asking if the archive would ever have a virtual submission program for those who weren't ready to leave home yet. So I said yes. I stood behind the mic in jeans and a linen blazer. No PowerPoint, no script. Just truth. I used to think being erased by your family was the worst thing that could happen, I told them. But what's worse is staying erased. Handing them the pen. Letting them write the story without you in it. Pause. Breath. So I took the pen back. I didn't rewrite their story. I just started my own. The room was quiet. Not awkward quiet. Weight of it quiet. Afterward, a woman my mother's age came up to me with tears in her eyes. My daughter doesn't talk to me anymore. She said I used to think she was just dramatic. But now I wonder if I just never really saw her. I didn't say she'll come around. I didn't offer hope wrapped in a bow. I just said start by believing her. The night I returned to the Cape House after the conference, the stars were clearer than ever. I walked out to the end of the dock and sat cross-legged toes, just brushing the cool air above the water. In the distance, the porch light glowed amber behind the curtains. Inside, 2 writers were laughing about something they'd written. The kettle whistled. A dog we'd recently adopted, a shaggy mutt named Maple, snored softly on the floor. I smiled. For once, the quiet around me wasn't empty. It was earned. I took out my phone and pulled up a photo I hadn't looked at in months. My family standing on the porch years ago, Ivy in her honor cords, Roland with his hand on her shoulder. Ophelia, mid-laugh. Me, nowhere, because they cropped me out, but I kept the original version. The one where I stood beside them in a pale blue dress, a crease across the waist. Mom once scolded me for. My hand barely touching Ivy's elbow. I zoomed in on my face, not to mourn it, to remember it. That girl tried so hard to belong. Now she didn't have to. She created something instead. Forgiveness. It didn't come in a single moment. It didn't arrive in a letter or a hug. It came in pieces. In learning to stop needing their approval like oxygen. In realizing that peace doesn't always look like reconciliation. It sometimes looks like boundaries. It sounds like no response to an apology that arrives too late. It feels like a house full of words you wrote yourself. A few weeks later, Ivy emailed me. Not about the house, not about the lawsuit, just a single message. I'm in therapy now. I'm not asking for a reset. Just wanted you to know that I'm trying to see clearly. Now I hope the retreat's going well. I stared at the message, then archived it. Not out of malice, just readiness. Sometimes moving on means not reopening the door but leaving a light on the porch in case they figure out how to walk with grace. On the first anniversary of the archive's launch, we held an open mic night. No press, no gala. Just mismatched chairs, twinkle lights, and a piano. Someone donated last fall. Each woman read something. Some cried. Some didn't. But every voice echoed back stronger. When it was my turn, I didn't read an essay. I read the note my grandmother wrote, the one I'd found in the attic. If they silence you, write louder. If they forget your name, build something with it they can't ignore. I looked around the room. There was a girl with blue braids curled on the couch. A woman in her 60s who had just submitted her first poem in 30 years. A mother and daughter holding hands crying into shared paper napkins. And in that moment, I knew I'd done it. Not just the revenge, the reclamation. My story didn't end with a courtroom or a press leak. It ended here, in this house, in this light. With the sound of pages turning, laughter floating, and no one asking me to be smaller, they took the crest. I kept the name, and I built a legacy with its story too. Hello, my name is Audalon. On the day I said I do, my own mother remained silent as I mailed my wedding invitations with hope. She referred to the picnic pictures she shared with my brother as family. She wasn't only absent at my wedding, I was removed from the family tale by her. She knocked on my door with a luggage 6 months later. The worst thing, though, wouldn't be that, would it? Prior to starting, from where are you watching? Have you ever experienced exclusion from your own family? Put it in the comments section due to this narrative. It's not only mine, it might also be yours. When I initially mailed out our wedding invites, I didn't freak out. Carefully sealed, handwritten envelopes with gold foil borders. Although I didn't anticipate much hoopla, I did anticipate recognition, particularly from my mother. Twice a week, I checked the tracker again in the hopes of receiving a ping or response. Anything. Her name appeared beneath seen, and I saw it. She had accepted the invitation. Then there was quiet. I reasoned that she was occupied. She would respond, I told myself. Finally, perhaps she was preparing a surprise. I even persuaded myself. But I knew better in my heart. When you stop making excuses for others, you discover the truth. I was unaware at the time that the quiet was more deafening than any scream I had ever heard as a kid. 2 months prior to that, I became aware that I was no longer included in the family group chat. I wasn't removed with drama, but rather just vanished, as if someone had turned down the volume on my life and hoped I would forget what sound was. I didn't realize how much it hurt. However, being silently wiped was nothing new to me. My mother was quite open about who her son Rose was as I was growing up. She would commend my elder brother Crosby for his initiative, even though he may have been caught stealing a petrol station. In contrast, I might obtain 2 degrees, and this place, that's good, sweetheart. When Crosby left college to join a startup, did you notice the essay he wrote for the corporate newsletter to honor his willingness to take chances? She arranged a party when he moved back in after that. Startup failed. He only needs a place to regroup, she reminded everyone while preparing a roast for him. I was the careless one, even though I moved out at age 21, paid all of my rent on time, and never asked for anything. I had received a promotion once at a family breakfast. My initial title in management, I hesitantly brought it up. I'm proud. Let Crosby have this one thing, sweetie, my mother murmured, taking a drink of her mimosa. Give him this one item. By the time I met Reeve, it seemed as though I had been taking his attention just by being there. Other than a narrow-lipped birthday text and a flimsy Christmas grin, I had given up expecting anything from my family. He questioned me once. Why do you always go quiet when I mention your mom? After seeing it early on, I didn't have a clever response. We organized a modest wedding, just a lovely garden next to Washington Park, some live acoustic music, and a small guest list, nothing extravagant. Reeves' folks were overjoyed. I got help with the outfit from his sister. His father volunteered to transport my aunt from Boulder. My mom didn't reply any calls or texts I sent the save the date back then. The invitation to the bridal shower received no response. She read the official RSVP link when I forwarded it to her still blazing, but left there like a cigarette. I was first shown the RSVP system's back end by Reeve. A week ago, she thought it was strange. I recall feeling numb as I stared at the television. We removed her name from the seating list that evening, not because she refused, but rather because she remained silent. The sun rose golden and gentle on the morning of the wedding, laughing over memories they were creating in real time. The Reeves family bustled around the site, fluffing tablecloths and stringing lights. I looked at the front row while wearing my dress, which was simple and had ivory lace. She was supposed to occupy the one vacant seat. The guests assumed she could be running late, but I knew I had anticipated it before I fastened my dress. Since that RSVP was not read, I had known since no one answered my calls since I became aware that my name was in the most recent group chat message. It was older than a year. Nevertheless, I grinned for the pictures. During the vows, I laughed. The bouquet toss seemed like throwing hope into a void, yet I danced as if nothing were missing, and this flawless vanilla-tiered beauty with sugared flowers was there when I cut the cake. I saw that the slice that was intended for her had not been touched. I packed up that slice later that evening and placed it in the refrigerator with Reeves' aunt's spinach dip and any remaining champagne. I refrained from crying. My cousin Lydie unexpectedly texted me 2 days after the wedding. I'm not sure if this was intended for you to view. A snapshot of my mother's message from the new family group chat is attached. Our true celebration will be Mullen's engagement party. Not because I was shocked, but more because it validated my long-held suspicions. My fingers turned cold as I held the phone. I hadn't just been overlooked. Someone had taken my position. Reeve asked if I wanted to go for a stroll as she entered the room. Even I didn't believe it when I informed him that I was all right. I gazed at the ceiling while lying in bed that night with my phone next to me face down. I didn't feel angry. It was the gradual, oppressive pain of being silently removed. How long I had been looking at the ceiling was a mystery to me. An hour or more, perhaps? The room's lighting changed at one point, the chilly gray of a Monday morning fading into that golden post-wedding warmth. As I lay over, I reached for my phone to browse numbly, and Instagram opened automatically like muscle memory rather than checking my messages, because I knew better by now. I tapped through tails hardly blinking. Then I noticed it. Under the same beautiful sky, a perfectly planned picnic is laid out on a blanket with checkered white and blue designs. Plates of sandwiches, sliced watermelon, a charcuterie board with honeycomb and brie. My mother holding a glass of sparkling lemonade without a stem, and Crosby wearing a button-down shirt like he was trying out for a lifestyle commercial were all there at my wedding. His girlfriend, Zinnia, who was not yet engaged, was cuddling up on his arm while showing off a teardrop-sized diamond. The post's caption honors the people who are most important. It wasn't until the phone bounced on the carpet that I realized it had fallen from my grasp. I refrained from crying. Hours away, I stood in a white dress slicing cake and acting as though the vacant chair in the front row wasn't a message. I just gazed at the image that was ingrained in my mind, my family, happy plates full. I got up, went to the kitchen, and automatically brewed coffee. The other room was still occupied by Reeve's slumber. He was not awakened by me. There was a part of me that wanted to sit quietly. Over the years, I had become proficient at it. I used to use fridge magnets to gauge my value as a child. Crosby and I were given this laminated progress board by my mother. Honor roll stars, spelling bee ribbons, and even a picture of him clutching a plastic trophy from a church basketball league were all part of his piece, a scientific fair ribbon for participation, a fading badge of faultless attendance. She once told me, "That's sweet honey, but Crosby just got MVP last weekend, after I placed second in an essay competition." Then, before mine had a chance to adhere, she affixed his laminated photo to the board. She referred to my first A in mathematics as lucky. She said that Crosby was intentionally controlling his load when he dropped a course. I felt like everything I did was a prelude to his big event. Reeve awoke later that afternoon and padded into the kitchen. Still in his t-shirt, his hair was disheveled. Leaning on the counter, he poured himself a cup of coffee and looked at my face. He knew he always did, but I said nothing. "They remembered Odie," he remarked quietly. "They just decided not to come." I nodded as its weight settled like a damp cloak over my shoulders. My fury was not present at that moment, only a token acknowledgement numb. I sat on the couch and scrolled once more. My cousin Lizzie, who had emailed me the screenshot of the group chat following the wedding, buzzed me with a message. At that moment, my mother had written, "New screenshot, new sting. This isn't how things should be, even though Reeve seems like a wonderful person. Crosby ought to start? No, we're delighted for them. No, I wish we were able to attend." A little adjustment to the family story. One in which there was nothing for me to lead. I felt something when I gazed at the words, "reduce in size." My wedding, the promises. The chair was vacant, the quiet. There had been no misunderstanding. A choice had been made. A line is drawn. I clicked on my photo drafts and dismissed the messages. I have a post saved. A carousel of wedding photos was what I had been planned. The bouquet in the air, Reeve's hand in mine. The cake, the happy visitors. I gazed at the button for posting. I then made a left swipe, pressed the erase button. I next accessed my RSVP spreadsheet, which I had meticulously created with each name, address, and status. I underlined everything. I also deleted it. Anger was absent, not quite yet. Nothing except silence. Every message from my mom that began, "I don't know if you're busy, but Crosby wanted me to ask," had the same pause I had experienced at every Thanksgiving prayer when Crosby's name was spoken first. I strolled into the kitchen once again. A napkin from the wedding was still on the table. I must have taken one folded one out of the box and just left it there without giving it much thought. I took it up and began folding it once more, first from corner to corner, then repeatedly into a triangle. Where there should have been noise, there was a tiny, silent movement that filled the room. Reeve returned, pausing upon noticing me. "Are you okay?" He did not ask. "Or you ought to speak with someone. You're free to feel it," he remarked as he sat down across from me. "Simply put, you are not required to remain in it." I gave him a serious look, and for the first time in days, I thought what he was saying was true. However, I continued folding because in reality, I remained in it. It took me a while to realize the reality. Until the deluge arrived, it dripped steadily and slowly like a leaking faucet. First, there was a phone call. Aunt Nadine's name appeared on my screen while I was folding towels in the laundry room. I was hesitant to answer the phone because we hadn't spoken in about a year. I cleaned my hands, gave the dryer a little more hum, and cautiously responded. "Hello, Nadine," she spoke in a timid, quiet voice. "Hello, my love. I thought you should know even though I wasn't sure if I should call. What comes next?" She hesitated. "Crosby has been the subject of your mother's plans." I took a seat on the washer's edge. The heart thudded as if it knew where this was headed. Nadine went on. "In 2 weeks, they have a venue in Estes Park reserved." "It is Odilon. It's a wedding." "A wedding?" "Slowly," I said. "Crosby isn't married, I am aware." That's why it was so strange. Vera was already discussing menus and unique cocktails, but she added that it was just in case Nadine's voice became softer as she spoke, and I could sense the humiliation in it. "Because your wedding didn't leave a legacy," she added. "It didn't really count." Legacy. That word hit me like a stone in my stomach because it was so cold and polished. I didn't answer. I was unable to. I remained in the washing room, surrounded by towels and in quiet. When the phone ended, the dryer's hum had stopped, but the buzz in my ears continued to grow. A flashback from 2 years ago slipped in at Vera's house for brunch. It was only her Crosby and a few of relatives and myself back then. "Well, you know Crosby is the last real heir to the family name," Vera had remarked while laughing over mimosas. "If he gets married, we'll be lucky." Right? I had shared their laughter. I believed it to be a harmless, archaic jab. It seemed like a plan now, though. I recalled Vera asking me if I would be keeping my last name as she leaned across the table following my marriage. She had poured more juice and continued, "I mean, Reeve comes off as kind, but when a woman marries in a way that doesn't bear the same weight, things are different." Then smiling warmly, she turned to Crosby and said, "We'll have a lot to celebrate when you get married, baby." At the time, I had dismissed it, but now the context was painful. I took a little fireproof folder out of my desk drawer later that night. The deed to our house was inside. 5 years ago, Reeve and I battled valiantly to close on that one. Our credit was overextended at the time. Vera was requested to co-sign till we were accepted. What did she say? "Odilon, even though I adore you, I can't attach my name to something that might not last. I simply fear that you're moving too quickly." We managed to seal the sale on our own by scraping together what we could. No help currently without a co-signature. I had evidence. It was in my hands. Nevertheless, Reeve returned home from work that evening. The dining table was where I was surrounded by papers that looked like maps of a battlefield. He put down his briefcase and looked around. "What's happening?" he inquired. I gave my phone to him. Another screenshot from Liddy. This one, which was from last week, came from Vera's group chat. She was very proud of Crosby and her writing. The moment we've all been anticipating has finally arrived. Odell was only a stand-in. Reeve didn't shout. Nothing was thrown by him. His jaw clenched with each word as he read it. Then he dropped the phone and turned to face me. He replied softly, "They don't see you. They spot a barrier. You took center stage." Crosby was to be a substitute. I felt something change inside of me as I looked at him. Not melancholy, not even anger. Decide on my laptop. I opened a new folder, began importing all of the digital wedding invites, emails, RSVPs, receipts, and screenshots. I included pictures of the location, the flowers, and our florist's signed check. After that, I took out the printed deed, underlined my name, and printed it once again. Even though I didn't know what I was making yet, it was going to be sturdy. Even though Vera never phoned me after the wedding, she insisted on holding a Zoom call to stay in touch, so she organized a virtual family gathering later that week. I used an anonymous login, just a dark square with the initials O on it. No microphone, no video. They gushed and giggled over Crosby's impending moment. Wearing a cream-colored dress, Zinnia sat next to him, drinking champagne as if it were her rehearsal supper. Vera's voice sounded artificial and sugary, and she was nearly shining. "We've been waiting for this," she remarked with a smile. "The celebration that carries on the tradition, the true one." I grinned as I reclined in my chair, still invisible. Let's then assess how realistic you desire it to be, connected to the following chapter. Crosby wasn't the only one. It was about getting rid of me. Crosby wasn't the only one. It was about getting rid of me. As I stood reheating leftover wedding cake in the kitchen, that notion hummed beneath my skin. It was only a square of vanilla that I had preserved out of habit. Not the fancy, multi-tiered section. I didn't feel hungry. All I wanted was something that felt authentic. A small amount of the frosting had melted and was slowly falling off. Similar to how that day had unfolded, I hadn't previously allowed myself to mentally relive the entire event. Not till today. However, the memory ran itself like an unstoppable loop once it got going. We were inside the reception tent with soft music playing in the background and warm light hung from the ceiling. The tribute video had been long overdue. It had taken Reeve and I weeks to put together pictures of us as children. Our very first flat. He makes funny videos with his nephews. Even the haphazard selfie I shot on the day I was promoted outside the courthouse. When the microphone made the announcement, I was standing close to the head table sipping a glass of wine. Now for the newlyweds. A small surprise, I recall grinning. I felt proud but anxious. Our love story was in that video. The pause followed, the quiet clearing of a throat, the laptop fidgeting. Apologies, everyone. The USB appears to be unreadable. Zinnia beat him there before Reeve could get up to investigate. Let's simply avoid it, she gave a chirp. Surely everyone has seen enough photos already. They all laughed civilly. The music came back. I felt sick to my stomach. I believed that to be bad luck at the time. It was one of those minor hiccups on the wedding day that everyone had warned me about, like a boot on the verge of coming off or a name mispronounced. It's nothing to stress about. I'm not so convinced it was luck anymore, though, particularly not in light of the subsequent events. The reception is almost over. Fran Vera's closest friend rose holding a flute of champagne. Everybody tapped their glasses. As if she had done this 100 times. She lifted hers. "We're celebrating love tonight," she stated in a sweet voice, "and we express our gratitude to everyone present for supporting Crosby's and other family legacies. We are committed to creating enduring homes and upholding the names we are honored to bear." That was it. Not a single reference to Reeve or myself. Not a single recognition that it was my day, my wedding. They didn't even whisper my name. I saw Reeve's parents exchange glances. His father peered down into his glass as if looking for a crack while his mother shifted uneasily. Reeve simply grabbed my hand. He gave it a light squeeze, but his hold held. I threw the USB in a drawer and forgot about it the following day. Or attempted. 2 weeks later, Reeve took it out once more. We were tidying up and rearranging the wedding's belongings. It functioned flawlessly when he connected it to his laptop. The video was there, frame by frame. The transition was smoothly timed by the music. The recording features my voice telling the tale of how we first met. Vera even made an appearance in a few of the early footage, grinning next to me at my graduation and giving me a hug after I received my bar test results. As it played, I took a leisurely seat. My throat constricted. I refrained from crying. I remained still. That was the part of myself she didn't want to see. I muttered the one she used to be proud of. Reeve was silent. But I could tell by the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he shut the laptop after that. He believed what I hadn't dared to speak out. I assume Cynthia swapped it out. It's the type of thing she'd write off as merely a tech blip, the type of stuff you can't verify but you feel in your bones. I spent the next morning going over the seating chart I had diligently crafted. Months previously, Vera had been listed at the middle of the family table, directly close to Reeve's parents. No special food request. No problem with movement. Nevertheless, she picked a table close to the rear with Crosby and a few coworkers. For the majority of the night, her chair was vacant. One of my cousins later confessed, while intoxicated, via post-reunion messages that Vera and Crosby had left the ceremony to answer a phone call. There was a presentation for Crosby's new consulting business that involved rebranding. She had stated that she didn't want to lose steam. They assumed you would comprehend. I gave a nod. I always did. I began browsing through my phone while seated at my kitchen counter that evening. I chose picture after picture of happy guests as the cake's centerpieces, which we were never able to cut together. I pushed delete on them, one by one, then I stopped, though. Reeve's sister had snapped a picture. At the moment, I hadn't even realized she had broken it. It showed me in the middle of laughing as Reeve's parents assisted me in getting into my dress. His father was clutching the train clumsily as if it were about to catch fire. His mother was fixing a pin in my hair with one hand while the other was resting on my shoulder. I was staring straight ahead, nor at the camera, nor at them. Unaware, just grinning, I left that one intact. Rather, I gazed at it for a while. Then, whether aloud or only in my mind, I whispered, "That day they may have been my actual family." I heard the knock on a Sunday afternoon. Not the timid type that begs for approval. No, this one had a lot of body, like a person who feels entitled to be somewhere. Anticipating a neighbor, I opened the door. A delivery accident, perhaps? Rather, my mom, Vera, was there. A tote bag on one arm and two hard-shell suitcases behind her. She unzipped but draped her winter coat. She had the type of subdued smile you see in the middle of a real estate agent's spiel. "Hello, my love." As if the welcome mat had been spread out for her, she whispered, going forward. I intended to stay here for a short while. The situation at Crosby's is tight. I blinked, nor astonishment, nor rage, only a sinking, empty numbness that crept into my jaw from someplace in my spine. Before I could speak, she was already wheeling her bags in. I didn't stop her. I didn't slam the door, but I also didn't offer tea. I stood as though the voice of someone else had taken the place of my own body. Reeve was seated at the kitchen table as if it were her own by the time she got back from the food shop. She lifted the mug and informed him I brewed chamomile. "Is it still your favorite?" He looked at her in a way that was neither impolite nor kind. Then he turned to face me. I shook my head in the slightest way. She carried a framed picture of Reeve and me into the living room later that night. She grinned to herself and remarked, "I knew this place had potential. I recall the time I assisted you in obtaining the loan. What a wise choice." Stunned, I gazed at her. No, she hadn't helped, and my throat constricted. Not by any means. 5 years ago, after a freelancing client's payment was delayed, and my credit union changed their mind, I was frantically trying to lock in the property and desperately needed a cosigner. I gave her a call. I asked her directly. "I can't put my name on something that could not last," she said. "It isn't intimate. Stability is the key." That loan decision letter had been printed out and stored deep in my file cabinet. Her speech now sounded as if it were coming from another universe. "Did you not assist?" "Finally," I said, quietly but firmly. "You didn't." She dismissed it with a wave. You know how banks manipulate things, don't you? That trip included me. I informed everyone that you were creating something unique. However, I didn't have to wait long to learn who everyone was. The bell was rung by Aunt Nadine the next afternoon. She arrived with a manila folder containing old tax documents, her face tense, her arms draped in a worn green blanket. She entered, gave Vera a chilly greeting, and whispered after me to the rear hallway. "We must speak." She handed the envelope to me when we were alone. She said, "You ought to see this." I assumed you were already aware. Then I noticed her vehicle in the driveway. The folder contained printed communications, including a sequence of correspondence between Vera and a lender with the topic, "Loan Extension Discussion, Crosby Property." Vera said, there it was. "For the purposes of paperwork, we are using my daughter's house in Denver. It's basically one of my advantages. I got it for her. The address is within my control. I'd be happy to explain." I pressed my fingertips to the page's edges. "She helped Crosby by using my name," I muttered. Nadine gave a nod. Tight lips. "It's hers, they've been claiming." "She's probably done it before?" Vera hummed as she washed dishes that evening, as if it were another night in the house she had always owned. I silently watched her from the archway. It was more than simply a home. This was the cause of all of my late-night freelance work, missed parties, and panic attacks during tax season. I owned this house, earned, fought for, kept up by sheer determination, whilst others would have left. I wasn't raised by Vera. To match her narrative, she created a version of myself. And now her loan papers reportedly, just as the light disappeared below the trees, Reeve returned home. He didn't inquire. My eyes showed it to him. After putting the goods down, he came right over and embraced me. "Don't let this go on," he whispered into my hair. "Never again," I gave him a chest nod. The lump that's pushing up in my throat. She was later adjusting throw cushions in the guest room when I found her. From the shelf, she took a little square napkin. I was unaware that it was still present. "Do you still bundle leaves in this dumb way?" With a little giggle, she asked, "I recall how you used to use them to adorn every Thanksgiving dinner." I carefully removed it from her hand. "That's the final one," I said. "When I stopped creating room for individuals who never showed up, I stopped creating them." She turned back to the luggage she had partially opened on the bed and feigned a laugh. Something inside of me stopped folding, so I didn't laugh with her. It was developing. She gave me a list right before I decided to let her remain. I was on the verge of persuading myself that it would not be as horrible by the next morning. Perhaps we could put up with one another for a few weeks. I had the impression that there could be a manageable version of this. Then I noticed the list as I entered the kitchen. A solitary sheet of paper neatly folded in half was positioned in the middle of the kitchen island, as if it were supposed to be there. I opened it up. I go to Dr. Leonard to have my groceries refilled. Pick up the laundry, concerning the roof. Contact the HOA. I quickly glanced at the bottom line, and while I'm sleeping, please don't use your office. The creak is excessively loud. The happy face was absent. Not a joke, no. Just a list, typed up if that's not too much. A series of commands like she was in charge of the home she had put it there. I said nothing at all. Completely relaxed. She entered behind me and stirred her tea. "Oh, I thought we might divide things up while I was here. You've always had a plan?" I didn't answer. She saw my silence as an implicit agreement, even though I didn't nod. She always did it that way, seeing my reluctance as assent and my silence as consent. Later that afternoon, I arranged old financial documents for my accountant while sitting cross-legged on the carpeting in the living room. Tax season was rapidly approaching. A black folder from the year I purchased the house was opened, mostly, supposing it to be scanned receipt copies. Rather, I discovered a copy of my first mortgage refusal because I didn't have a co-signer. A notarized letter was included. Vera's, it was not a suggestion. It was not a reference to a character. Her statement that she did not want to tie her assets to speculative property was formal and icy. In black ink, she wrote, She was now sitting in the same speculative house telling people that she had assisted me in purchasing it. I placed the letter on the kitchen counter that evening after supper. Vera hardly gave it a look. Then, when she picked an apple out of the fruit dish, she said, "You did well? Why are we resurrecting the past?" I didn't recoil. You informed the bank that this establishment was not worth supporting. You're claiming it as yours now. No one questions what I say, she said, nibbling into the apple, leaning against the counter as if we were debating paint colors. So far behind me. Reeve had been stacking dishes, but she paused. His silence was palpable to me. I knew he had heard every word, even if he remained silent. Things worsened the following morning. Vera cleared her throat at breakfast. I've wanted to inquire. Would you be able to take care of Grandma full-time? If it came from you, it would look great with everything going on. In any case, you work from home. I blinked slowly. She's in Arkansas. Yes, but she trusts you and you don't have children. I was not even amused. I didn't even speak louder. You didn't attend my wedding, I remarked, glancing at her. You brought me up in your home and now you expect me to tidy up your mess. She pretended to blow out her breath via her nostrils. Audilon, you constantly distort things. No. At last, I began to untangle them. She got up and walked out of the room. No retreat, no apologies. That same feeling of mastery. She always put on armor to protect herself. I stepped out onto the porch while holding a trembling phone. It was a clear afternoon. The air froze my breath. I gazed at the walls of the house I had constructed out of weariness, stubbornness, and a desire to show that I was not in need of rescue. I nearly convinced myself that it would be simpler to leave for a brief while. Then I recalled the flowers, the napkin, and the unplaying video. That seat remained vacant. The pain no longer raged. It solidified into resolve rather than resentment. I entered. Reeve was sitting on the couch with headphones in and her laptop open. I opened a blank Word document while seated at my workstation. I got to typing, "Who should I contact about fictitious ownership claims?" But I stopped before I hit save, writing to people who were already aware of her methods and acted as though they were unaware of them was pointless. I didn't have to elaborate. I had to exhibit. I grabbed my phone, launched the voice recording app, and hit the record button. I hit the play button. After letting the recording start, put the phone face down on the table and entered the kitchen as if nothing had occurred. Vera's voice came back to me from the living room, not the one she used around churchgoers or neighbors, the one she didn't say till she forgot people could hear. Audilon was only a bump in our family's history, you know. Vera chuckled. Sharp but feeble voice. Zinnia said that Crosby's legacy is the heritage we attempted to raise her as a mistake. Correct. It failed. There was giggling. Close, smug, cruel. Crosby remained silent during the video, but it wasn't a defense. Complicity was involved. Aunt Nadine's voicemail from months ago had been buried in my mailbox unopened. In the event that you ever quit believing them, she had labeled it. And now I listened once again, the sound still fresh in my ears. Then again, I remained silent and did not cry. I simply sat on the couch with my knees up to my chest and my phone like a razor on my hand. I didn't have any buzzing thoughts. They were sharpening, settling. The morning was a Sunday. In her own words, Vera had gone out to meet a friend for bagels and early service. When Reeve came back from his run, I was still where I had been 2 hours before I gave the phone to him. Without asking, he listened. When it was over, he said, "Do you want to send it?" and lowered the phone. I gave a headshake. "No," I answered quietly. Together, I want them to hear it without control, without warning. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew that anger wasn't the way to go. It was about taking back the narrative. I launched my laptop and began creating folders, property fraud and wedding falsehoods. The recording screenshots, papers, timelines, emails, and deeds were all included in each folder. I didn't write a revealer. I wasn't doing it for them. I was preserving a reality they couldn't twist. I was doing it to remember how long I had stooped for those who didn't believe I was important. The monthly family potluck was hosted by Aunt Beth 4 days later. This time I said yes, even though I hadn't gone to one in years. I didn't dress up. Just jeans, a black sweater, and the assurance of someone who has nothing more to prove. No smiles, no cosmetics. The kitchen was filled with baked ZTI and passive-aggressive praise. When I entered, Vera distributed cookies that she hadn't prepared while she stood at the counter. She said, "It's just so nice to be with people who still value togetherness." In the corner, I noticed Crosby discussing his consultancy business. Zinnia was whispering to someone about a neighbor's divorce, already intoxicated from Aunt Beth's white sangria. I put my phone in the middle of the dining table, put my bag on the chair opposite from Vera, and moved past the buffet table. Reeve, who was already sat next to me, looked up at me and nodded. When I hit the play button, Vera's speech caused the room to freeze. Crosby's laugh. "Zinnia's poison." By the time the sound died down, nobody was blinking or eating. Vera opened her mouth but said nothing. She blushed a hue I had never seen her do before. She reached for the phone as if it might change the course of events. She growled, "This isn't how we deal with things in this family." I slowly stood with my eyes level. "You're correct. I'm no longer doing it your way because of this." Nobody gave a clap. Nobody said anything. However, a number of cousins got up and left. Perhaps we all needed to hear that. Aunt Beth muttered as she dried her tears and got to work cleaning early. I made no request for an apology. I didn't turn around. The sole sound behind me was the clatter of cutlery, which at once had meaning as I left the front door with Reeve by my side. I didn't feel victorious. For the first time, I felt clean. I wasn't being swallowed by the stillness. It was preparing for the next step. I wasn't searching for a battle when I checked Facebook that morning, but it was there. Vera's post was like a digital ink smack in the middle of my screen. I started constructing a house for our family's history 30 years ago. I'm honored to be carrying on that tradition today from the house where our kids were raised. The attached photo is a wonderful slice of my house with just enough siding and a glimpse of the garden to imply coziness without showing any signs of myself. I read the comments and scrolled. "You've always been so graceful. Vera, how fortunate your family is." Just one read. "Legacy? That is the legacy of true moms." Like a sentimental real estate advertisement for a life she never experienced. She branded everything with family ancestry and a loving grandmother. And first, they accepted her. The HOA's quarterly meeting was convened at the neighborhood clubhouse the very next day. It felt as though fate had set aside that date specifically for me, even though I had already put it on my calendar weeks prior. Vera was already there when I got there, chit-chatting with the board president about how long she had been there and how well the area was maintained. She looked at me and grinned in a way I had lost recognition of. The meeting got underway. We read the minutes and exchanged updates. The member comments followed. I held out my hand. I stood up and said, "I want to make things clear. Steady. The ownership of 2429 Glenview Way appears to be unclear. I put a copy of the deed on the table in the community. I used my money, credit, and job to buy this mansion in my name. No legal document. Names Vera Lewis as the owner, co-owner, or guarantor." I stopped. Nobody spoke up. Here are the tax documents, the mortgage approvals, and the letter of refusal. I got when I requested her to co-sign, in case you were confused. I didn't raise my voice 5 years ago. There was no need for me to, for the room had become very silent. Later that evening, I sent a straightforward post to the local forum that included the wedding tribute video, 3 side-by-side photos, and other posts about my property paperwork. Yes, the one she had used the damaged USB to sabotage. The reaction was instantaneous. Whoa, there was writing. "You were the sole one weeding the flower beds, and we often wondered why." That video broke me again. How could they be so cruel to you? We appreciate you showing us by tomorrow at 12:00. More than 70 comments were left on the thread. Individuals related personal tales of moms who claimed credit, sisters who dismantled households that pretended that treachery was custom. It was more than simply the indignation that shocked me. It was the type of insight that comes from experiencing reality rather than rumors. As was to be expected, Zinnia attempted to control the damage via a shared thread. "It's sad when people use family as a pity point," she said. "Your private life is a true reflection of your class." However, below was a response from Vera's old acquaintance. "I was warned not to go to Oberlin's wedding by you. Avoid pushing it." The message is still with me. Then the screen suddenly broke open. There were screenshots after that. There was a leak of private messages. Old allies started to distance themselves. I gave to Crosby's company since Vera said the home was collateral. One church friend even remarked, "I want to talk to someone about it within a 48-hour period." Her own manipulation was causing her decades-long facade of selflessness and dignity to crumble. "I didn't cheer. I didn't claim to have told you. Rather, I got a message from a person I hardly recognized. When I was 7 years old, a woman used to teach Sunday school. I should have noticed it, but I was unaware that she wrote the manner in which you conducted yourself following that wedding." That was true, Grace. I apologize. Something softened inside of me at that very moment. It was toward myself, not Vera. Because perhaps, just possibly, I no longer had to struggle to be seen. Perhaps I had already been helped by the truth. The week passed in a fog. I kept myself occupied by responding to emails from the HOA board, answering comments from neighbors, and even making a lemon bread for Reeves' workplace. As if it were nothing, my family had just been ripped apart by seismic activity. However, I heard it one Sunday night while folding laundry in the living room. It was a knock at something deeper, like a weight released from recollection rather than the front door. The smell of fresh rain on concrete filled the air as I opened the door. Over Vera's shadow, streetlights flashed. This time, she didn't have a suitcase. No umbrella, no baggage. Only her brown coat made her shoulders stiff. She clutched her hands as though she wasn't sure what they were meant to accomplish. Her voice was broken and soft. I'm at a loss for words. I remained on the doorway. I didn't grin. "You did it already," I stated each time you remained silent. She blinked too quickly and turned her head away. However, no tears fell. Neither from me nor from her. Our silence said louder than any apology could, and we stood there for a little longer. She wanted to speak with me, only us. No posts, no cameras. I re-entered, leaving the door slightly ajar so that her words may pass through. "I had no intention of hurting you." The situation just became more complex. I gave a soft shake of my head. "Vera, this is no longer about hurt. Clarity is key. I need an explanation, but I've moved on." She scowled as if she didn't comprehend, as if she didn't think about the math. "I never imagined you would become frigid." I looked her in the eyes. "I'm not chilly. I understand." I shut the door after that. Just closed, not smashed. The non-resonant kind of closed. The sort that puts a stop to things. Reeve sat next to me on the couch later that evening. We remained still for a while, listening to the gentle rain pattering against the glass like gentle fingers. He looked over. "Are you feeling better now?" I pondered for a long time. Tried to find a term that wasn't untrue. Not much better. At last I said, "Just finished." He gave a nod. With one arm, he drew me in while keeping the remote in the other, which he hadn't used in 20 minutes. "That's the sound of healing." "Oh," he said. We simply sat there. Don't speak. No TV, simply breathe. Let it rain and know. Weeks went by. I threw Reeves' family a breakfast one Saturday morning. Pastries were brought by his parents. While I was arranging the supper, one of his sister's 2 children ran right into my kitchen. The young girl, about 7 years old, paused next to me and cocked her head. "It's quite lovely." You learned that from whom I had just folded a napkin and she was looking at it leaf-like. Gentle carefully crept. An echo. I paused, nobody stayed. Gently, I pressed the napkin next to her plate and stated that, but someone who showed me what it looks like to leave, she was unable to comprehend. She didn't have to. She simply grinned and hurried to get some orange juice. I sat with my diary that night, not knowing how to wrap up something that had ended so many times before. I choose to write the truth instead. My mother didn't just not show up for my wedding. She didn't show up for the person I turned into. But I no longer measure love by who claps the loudest or who posts the most, I said, after pausing. Who turns up when no one is looking is how I gauge it. That was the problem of creating a life. You begin to worry about who attends the housewarming vows, milestones, and birthdays. But in reality, it's about who folds next to you, who checks the pilot light, and who carries in your garbage can when you forget. Just to be close, not to pass judgment. Shutting the diary, I muttered aloud. You may eventually be able to pick the family you create. I meant it too. Have you ever shut a door behind you? You finally liked yourself enough not because you hated yourself. The quiet of those we used to call home can sometimes cause the biggest scars, not strangers. Someone is always eliminated when love is evaluated by devotion to a legacy rather than the one in front of you. Have you ever had your own narrative omitted in order to save the reputation of someone else? Please leave a comment below if this story touched you, and remember to subscribe for more stirring tales like this one, because it takes more than time to recover from family conflict. Truth is necessary.